My name is Abigail Mitchell, and at 27 years old, I never imagined I'd be sitting in a courtroom fighting for custody of my 5-year-old daughter Lily. My ex-husband Jason Collins, a wealthy businessman, wanted full custody. But nothing prepared me for the moment my own mother, Catherine, took the stand as his witness. Her words cut deeper than any knife. She can barely hold a job. The courtroom fell silent. Then, something unexpected happened. Chief Justice Thomas Harrington stood up after hearing all the evidence. My heart stopped as he began. She's been. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. 5 years ago, my life looked completely different. I was a promising marketing executive at Wilson & Gray, one of the top firms in Chicago. My career trajectory was pointing straight up, with talks of a promotion to senior management within a year or two. I worked hard, stayed late, and built a reputation as someone who could handle high-pressure campaigns with grace and creativity. My colleagues respected me, and I loved the challenge of my work. Then I met Jason Collins at a charity gala. He was handsome, charismatic, and the CFO of Meridian Technologies. Our eyes locked across the room, and by the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers. What followed was a whirlwind romance that felt like something out of a movie. Expensive dinners, weekend getaways, surprise gifts for no reason at all. Jason seemed perfect, attentive to every detail, remembering my favorite flowers, peonies, and how I liked my coffee, almond milk latte with cinnamon. Within 6 months, he proposed on a private yacht on Lake Michigan, and I said yes without hesitation. The wedding was lavish, exactly what I had dreamed of as a little girl. My mother, Catherine, cried tears of joy, telling everyone her daughter had made it by marrying such a successful man. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs in her emphasis on his status rather than our happiness together. The first year of marriage was beautiful. We moved into Jason's penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. We traveled to Europe, the Caribbean, and Asia. I continued working, and Jason seemed supportive of my career. When I found out I was pregnant, it felt like the perfect addition to our seemingly perfect life. The day Lily was born was the happiest day of my life. Holding that tiny, perfect human in my arms, I felt a love I had never experienced before. Jason seemed equally enamored, proudly showing pictures to everyone at his office. For a few precious months, we were truly a family. But as Lily grew, I noticed changes in our dynamic. Jason's work hours grew longer, and when he was home, he started questioning my spending habits. Did you really need to buy another outfit for Lily? She'll outgrow it in a month. Or, that's a lot to spend on groceries this week. Despite the fact that his salary was more than enough to cover our expenses, he began monitoring every purchase. When Lily turned 2, I suggested cutting back my hours at work to spend more time with her. Jason immediately agreed, too quickly in retrospect. A month later, he suggested I quit altogether. Why pay for childcare when you could be raising our daughter yourself? I make enough for all of us. It made sense at the time, and I loved the idea of being more present for Lily's early years. That decision marked the beginning of my loss of independence. Without my own income, I had to ask Jason for money for everything. He set up an allowance for household expenses that barely covered necessities. Any extra purchases required his approval. When I mentioned returning to work part-time as Lily approached preschool age, he dismissed the idea. Lily needs consistency. It would be selfish to disrupt her routine for your career. Gradually, I became isolated. My work friends drifted away, busy with their own careers. Our social life consisted almost entirely of Jason's colleagues and their spouses, gatherings where I felt increasingly like an accessory rather than a partner. Jason would interrupt me when I spoke, correcting details of stories or telling people what I really meant to say. At home, Jason grew emotionally distant. Conversations became transactional, focused on schedules and Lily's needs. When I tried to discuss our relationship, he claimed exhaustion from work or said I was being dramatic. Nights when he didn't come home until after midnight became more frequent, always with the excuse of client meetings or work emergencies. I tried everything to save our marriage. I suggested counseling, but Jason refused, saying there was nothing wrong that I couldn't fix by being more supportive. I bought self-help books about marriage, tried new recipes, planned special evenings that he would cancel at the last minute. I even reached out to his mother for advice, only to be told that men need their space, and I should focus on keeping a beautiful home. Through it all, I held on to hope that things would improve. For Lily's sake, I wanted our family to work. She deserved to grow up with both parents in a loving home. Each morning, I would wake up thinking, today will be different. Today we'll find our way back to each other. But each night I would go to bed alone, listening to the silence of our increasingly empty marriage. Depression crept in slowly, like a fog rolling over my life. I kept it hidden, especially from my mother, who had always valued appearances above all else. I painted on a smile during family gatherings and nodded along when Catherine praised Jason for taking such good care of my girl. Inside, I was drowning, but I was determined to stay afloat for Lily. Her smile, her laughter, her little arms around my neck were the lifeline I clung to, the reason I got out of bed each morning despite the growing weight in my chest. The truth came crashing down on a Wednesday afternoon. Lily had a mild fever, so I decided to keep her home from preschool. When her temperature dropped after her nap, I thought a change of scenery might do us both good. Let's surprise Daddy at work, I suggested, packing a small picnic to share in the park near his office. The receptionist at Meridian Technologies gave me a strange look when I asked for Jason, then made a phone call while glancing at me uncomfortably. "Mr. Collins is in a meeting," she finally said. "I can let him know you stopped by." Something in her tone made me suspicious. "We'll wait," I replied, settling Lily in a chair with her favorite book. 30 minutes passed before the elevator doors opened, and Jason emerged with a tall, blonde woman. They were laughing, his hand resting casually on the small of her back. The intimacy of the gesture was unmistakable. They froze when they saw us. "Daddy," Lily squealed, running toward him. The woman, who I would later learn was Stephanie Parker from accounting, quickly excused herself. "What are you doing here?" Jason asked, his voice tight as he picked up Lily. There was no joy in seeing his daughter, only panic at being caught. "We brought lunch," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Lily was feeling better, and we thought it would be a nice surprise. The confrontation that followed in his office was brief and devastating. When confronted, Jason didn't even try to deny the affair. "These things happen, Abigail. You've been so focused on Lily, so distant. What did you expect?" The blame flipped so quickly to me, as if his betrayal were somehow my fault for being a devoted mother. That night, Jason packed a suitcase while I sat numb on our bed. "I need some space to figure things out," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I'll transfer money for the bills." He kissed a confused Lily goodbye, promising to see her soon, and walked out the door. The following weeks were a blur of tears and panic attacks hidden from my daughter. The money Jason transferred covered barely a month of expenses for our high-end apartment. My calls went straight to voicemail, and his responses to texts about financial support were vague and noncommittal. Reality set in quickly. I needed to find work. After 3 years out of the workforce, my resume had a glaring gap. Former contacts at Wilson and Gray were sympathetic, but couldn't offer anything at my previous level. "Maybe try something entry-level to get back in the industry," my old boss suggested. I took a position as a marketing assistant at half my former salary, swallowing my pride for Lily's sake. The hours were long, the work menial, and the younger team members treated me like their mother rather than a colleague. After 2 months, budget cuts eliminated my position. This began a cycle of short-term jobs: administrative assistant at a law firm, let go when the partner I worked for left, social media manager for a boutique. The owner couldn't afford to keep me after sales dipped, customer service representative. The commute made picking up Lily from daycare impossible. Each failure chipped away at my confidence and drained my dwindling savings. Desperate, I reached out to my mother. Catherine had always been critical, but surely would help her daughter and granddaughter in crisis. Her initial response seemed promising. She listened to my tearful explanation of the situation, clucking sympathetically. "Men and their wandering eyes," she said. "But marriages hit rough patches, Abigail. Have you considered counseling?" I explained that Jason had moved in with Stephanie, that reconciliation wasn't an option. Catherine's sympathy turned to judgment. "Marriage is a commitment, not something you throw away at the first sign of trouble. Your father had his indiscretions too, but I stood by him." Nevertheless, she loaned me enough money to cover rent for 2 months, with the expectation that I would sort things out in that time. Her calls became daily interrogations. Had I found a stable job yet? Had I spoken to Jason about coming home? Had I considered what this instability was doing to Lily? Meanwhile, I had to find a new place to live. The lease on the apartment Jason and I had shared was ending, and there was no way I could afford to renew it. Each property I viewed was a step down from the last, my standards adjusting with my diminishing options. Finally, I settled on a small 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, with water stains on the ceiling and neighbors whose arguments penetrated the thin walls. Moving day was a study in downsizing. From our spacious penthouse to a cramped apartment, from designer furniture to secondhand finds, from a playroom filled with toys to a corner of the living room designated as Lily's space. My daughter, resilient as children often are, turned it into an adventure. "It's cozy, like a fort," she declared, helping arrange her stuffed animals on her new bed. Childcare became my most pressing financial concern. Full-time daycare cost more than I could afford, but I couldn't work without it. I found a home-based daycare run by an elderly woman named Mrs. Jenkins, whose rates were reasonable but whose facility was far from ideal. Still, she was kind to Lily, and that had to be enough. Lily's confusion about our new situation manifested in nightmares and clinginess. "When is Daddy coming home?" she would ask. "Why can't we go back to our old house?" Each question was a dagger to my heart. Jason's visits with her were sporadic, often canceled at the last minute due to work commitments, leaving Lily in tears and me picking up the emotional pieces. One evening, after putting Lily to bed following another canceled visit from Jason, I found an email from him. My heart jumped, hoping for increased support or at least a consistent visitation schedule for Lily's sake. Instead, the message contained a single line: "My lawyer will be contacting you regarding custody arrangements." A cold dread settled over me. Jason hadn't wanted much involvement with Lily since moving out, often going weeks without seeing her. Why the sudden interest in custody? The answer came the next day when I received another email, this time with Stephanie Parker copied. They were engaged, with a wedding planned for the summer. The custody filing was part of their new family narrative, with my daughter as the final acquisition. The custody papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who seemed embarrassed to hand them to me. The legal language was dense, but the message was clear. Jason was seeking full custody of Lily, claiming I was emotionally and financially unstable and unable to provide a secure environment. Each accusation felt like a physical blow. Most shocking was the detailed documentation, photographs of my apartment building with close-ups of the peeling paint and security issues, records of my employment history since our separation, characterized as erratic and inconsistent. Even statements from neighbors about the times I had come home late due to work, implying neglect rather than the reality of a single mother trying to make ends meet. Jason had hired Natalie Simmons, a family attorney known for her aggressive tactics and high success rate. Her firm specialized in high-net-worth divorces and custody battles, with a reputation for overwhelming opponents with paperwork and legal maneuvers. The initial filing alone was over 50 pages. I had exactly 2 weeks to respond or risk losing by default. With less than $300 in my checking account, private legal representation seemed impossible. After calling a dozen law firms and being quoted retainer fees I couldn't possibly afford, I turned to the county's legal aid office. There I met Sarah Williams, a public defender with kind eyes and an overflowing caseload. Unlike the dismissive receptionists at private firms, she actually listened to my story, taking notes and asking relevant questions. When I finished, she sighed deeply. "I'm going to be honest with you, Abigail. This is going to be difficult. Your ex-husband has resources we can't match. He's been methodically building this case while you've been focused on survival. She tapped her pen against her legal pad. But that doesn't mean we can't fight. The fact that he's only become interested in custody after announcing his engagement is suspicious. Judges notice these patterns. Sarah explained that we needed to build our own case quickly. She gave me assignments: gather Lily's medical records showing my consistent care, request letters from her teachers, document every time Jason had canceled or shortened visits with Lily, collect evidence of my ongoing job search and educational efforts. As I threw myself into gathering documentation, I noticed my social circle shrinking even further. Friends who had initially sympathized with my situation became distant. Invitations to playdates with Lily's friends dwindled. At a school function, I overheard another mother mentioning a dinner party at Jason and Stephanie's new house. They've done such a beautiful job making a room for his daughter, she said. It's so sad about his ex-wife's issues. Thank goodness he's stepping up. I realized Jason had been systematically reshaping our social narrative. To our former friends, I wasn't a dedicated mother doing her best in difficult circumstances. I was the unstable ex with issues that justified Jason's actions. The isolation became nearly complete when even parents at Lily's school began avoiding eye contact. Then came another blow. The marketing firm where I had finally secured a stable position announced a restructuring. As the newest employee, I was the first let go. The timing couldn't have been worse, just days before a scheduled court appearance. When I called to request a postponement, I was curtly informed that my employment status was relevant to the proceedings and the hearing would continue as scheduled. That night, after putting Lily to bed, I called my mother in desperation. "Mom, I need help," I admitted, swallowing my pride. "Jason is trying to take Lily. I just lost my job and I need money for a proper lawyer. I can pay you back once I'm on my feet again." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought we had been disconnected. Finally, Catherine spoke, her voice unusually formal. "Abigail, I don't think throwing money at this situation is the answer. Perhaps Jason has a point about stability." "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm saying that sometimes we need to put aside our pride and consider what's best for the child. Jason can provide Lily with opportunities and security that you simply cannot right now." The betrayal was so unexpected I couldn't process it immediately. "Mom, he's the reason I'm in this situation. He cut me off financially, he made it impossible for me to maintain my career, and now he's trying to take my daughter because it fits his new family image." "That's your version of events," Catherine replied coolly. "Jason has been very open with me about his concerns for Lily. He's shown me the documentation." The realization hit me like a physical blow. "You've been talking to Jason?" "Behind my back. He reached out to me as a concerned father. As Lily's grandmother, I have a right to be involved." "Involved by helping him take her away from me?" My voice rose despite my efforts to control it. "Involved by ensuring she has the best possible upbringing." "I'm not taking sides, Abigail. I'm thinking of Lily." But she had taken sides. The next day, I received an updated witness list for the custody hearing. Listed prominently was Catherine Mitchell, maternal grandmother. My own mother had agreed to testify against me. I confronted her immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed her number. "How could you do this? Your own daughter." "Don't be so dramatic, Abigail. I'm simply going to tell the truth as I see it. If you had been more strategic about this whole situation instead of playing the victim, we wouldn't be here." The conversation devolved from there, with old wounds reopened and new ones created. By the time I hung up, it was clear I had lost not only my husband and my financial security, but my mother as well. The isolation was now complete. That night, I discovered through a mutual acquaintance that Catherine had been feeding Jason information for months. My employment struggles, my emotional moments, even details about my apartment that she had noticed during her infrequent visits. All of it had been reported back to Jason and his attorney, building their case that I was unstable and incapable. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Jason had done. He had been my husband, but she was my mother. The person who should have protected me at all costs was actively working against me, against her own grandchild's relationship with her mother. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. The weight of fighting not just Jason and his resources, but my own mother left me gasping for breath in the darkness. How had I become so alone? The only answer that came in the pre-dawn hours was Lily's soft breathing from the bed beside mine, where she had crawled after another nightmare. For her, I would face whatever came next. For her, I would not give up. The family courthouse was an imposing structure of stone and glass, designed to intimidate with its formal grandeur. I arrived early, dressed in my only professional outfit, a navy blue suit I had purchased secondhand and tailored myself to save money. Sarah met me at the entrance, her arms full of files and her expression determined. "Ready?" she asked, studying my face. "As I'll ever be," I replied, smoothing my jacket nervously. Inside, the courtroom was already buzzing with activity. Jason sat at the plaintiff's table, immaculate in a custom suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Beside him, Natalie Simmons arranged documents with military precision. They looked confident, prepared, a stark contrast to my table with its public defender and hastily gathered evidence. Chief Justice Thomas Harrington entered, and the proceedings began with formal introductions. Despite his reputation for fairness, I couldn't help feeling intimidated by his stern expression as he reviewed the initial documents. Jason was called first. Under Natalie's careful questioning, he painted a picture of himself as the concerned father, the stable provider, the reasonable parent seeking only what was best for Lily. He described finding success in business through hard work and discipline, values he wanted to instill in his daughter. "And what prompted your concerns about Ms. Mitchell's custody?" Natalie asked. Jason sighed, the picture of reluctance. After our separation, Abigail's behavior became increasingly erratic. She couldn't maintain steady employment, moved Lily to a substandard living situation, and seemed emotionally volatile. I tried to be supportive, but when Lily started coming to visits talking about mommy crying all the time and strangers watching her while mommy worked, I became concerned about her well-being. Each word twisted the truth just enough to create a damning narrative. Yes, I had cried, but always after Lily was asleep. Yes, she had been with babysitters, but they were licensed providers, not strangers. Yes, our apartment was modest, but it was clean and safe, not substandard. During cross-examination, Sarah did her best to challenge Jason's portrayal, but his answers were smooth and practiced. When asked about his sudden interest in custody coinciding with his engagement, he had a ready answer: "Stephanie, and I want to provide Lily with a stable 2-parent household." We've been hesitant to push for changes to avoid disrupting Lily's routine, but it's become clear that the current situation isn't in her best interest. What followed was a parade of witnesses supporting Jason's claims. His boss testified to his work ethic and family values. Their former neighbor described instances when I had seemed overwhelmed with parenthood. Even Lily's former pediatrician, who had seen her only during our marriage, spoke about Jason's involvement in appointments, conveniently omitting that he had attended exactly 2 of them. Each testimony built upon the last, creating a composite picture of Jason as the ideal father and me as barely functional. Sarah objected when possible, but most of the testimony was opinions skillfully presented as fact, difficult to challenge without appearing defensive. Then came the moment I had been dreading. "The plaintiff calls Catherine Mitchell," the court officer announced. My mother entered, perfectly coiffed in a conservative dress, her expression serene. As she took the oath, her eyes briefly met mine before sliding away. There was no warmth there, no apology, only resolve. "Mrs. Mitchell, what is your relationship to the parties in this case?" Natalie began. "I am Abigail's mother and Lily's grandmother," Catherine replied, her voice steady. "And how would you characterize your relationship with your daughter?" "We've always been close. I raised Abigail as a single mother myself after her father left when she was 12. I've tried to be supportive throughout her life, including during this difficult period." The irony of her claiming we were close, while testifying against me, was almost too much to bear. I gripped the edge of the table, focusing on controlling my breathing. "Have you had opportunities to observe your daughter's parenting and living situation since her separation from Mr. Collins?" "Yes, I visit regularly and speak with Abigail several times a week." Another lie. Her visits had dwindled to once a month at most, and our phone calls had become increasingly strained. And what have you observed about your daughter's stability and caregiving abilities? Catherine straightened in her seat. Abigail has always loved Lily, but since the separation, she's struggled significantly. She's been emotionally fragile, often crying or expressing hopelessness in Lily's presence. Most concerning is her employment situation. Her voice grew firmer as she delivered the line that would become the centerpiece of her testimony. She can barely hold a job. In the past year, she's had 4 different positions, none lasting more than a few months. This creates tremendous instability for Lily, with constantly changing schedules and childcare arrangements. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. I felt lightheaded, disconnected from my body as my own mother continued to dismantle my case for custody of my child. Mrs. Mitchell, in your observation, has this instability affected Lily? Natalie prompted. Absolutely. Lily has become anxious and clingy. She asks me questions no 5-year-old should worry about, like whether mommy has enough money for food or if they'll have to move again. The last time I visited, she was sleeping in Abigail's bed because of nightmares. Children need consistency and security. Despite Abigail's love for Lily, I'm concerned about her ability to provide those essential elements. As Catherine continued, she revealed private conversations we'd had during my darkest moments, times when I had turned to her for maternal support only to have those vulnerabilities now used as weapons against me. She spoke of my emotional breakdown after losing a job, in reality, a single evening of tears after a particularly difficult day. My financial irresponsibility, struggling to make ends meet on inconsistent child support, and my unhealthy attachment to Lily, the close bond of a mother and daughter navigating trauma together. Most devastating was her assessment of my mental health. Abigail has always been sensitive, but since the separation, I've observed symptoms of what I believe is clinical depression. She refuses to seek professional help, insisting she's fine despite clear evidence to the contrary. I'm deeply concerned about Lily being raised in an environment where mental health issues go untreated. As Catherine spoke, I was transported back to my childhood, to the countless times my mother had criticized me for being too sensitive or too emotional. I remembered her own struggle as a single mother after my father left, her bitterness hardening into a shell of perfectionism and judgment. She had survived by shutting down her emotions, by focusing on appearances and status. My vulnerability, my refusal to simply move on as she had, must have seemed like weakness to her. When Natalie finished her questioning, Sarah approached for cross-examination. Mrs. Mitchell, you mentioned raising Abigail as a single mother. Did you struggle financially during that time? Catherine shifted uncomfortably. Initially, yes, but I quickly secured stable employment. Did you receive any support from family during that difficult transition? My parents helped somewhat, she admitted reluctantly. So you had a support system that Abigail currently lacks, including support from her mother. Is that correct? The situations are entirely different, Catherine countered. I didn't have the option of reconciliation or accepting help from my ex-husband as Abigail does. Sarah pressed on. Has Mr. Collins offered reconciliation? Not explicitly, but he's been very generous with financial support when Abigail has been reasonable about co-parenting. This outright lie nearly caused me to interrupt, but Sarah subtly motioned for me to remain calm. Can you provide specific examples of this generosity? Sarah asked. Catherine hesitated. I don't have access to their financial arrangements. I only know what Abigail and Jason have shared with me. So your testimony about Mr. Collins's financial support is based entirely on hearsay, not first-hand knowledge? Objection, Natalie interjected. Argumentative. Sustained, Justice Harrington ruled. Please move on, counsel. Sarah's cross-examination continued, but the damage had been done. My own mother had provided the emotional testimony that Jason's case needed, the personal betrayal that no amount of legal maneuvering could fully counteract. When the morning session ended for lunch, I fled to the courthouse bathroom, locking myself in a stall as the tears I had been holding back finally broke free. The weight of fighting not just Jason's resources, but my own mother's testimony felt crushing. How could I possibly win against such odds? What judge would grant custody to a mother whose own parent testified against her? Sarah found me there, passing tissues under the stall door before gently coaxing me out. "I know it feels impossible right now," she said, her voice kind but firm. "But we're not done. Abigail, listen to me. Courts have seen vindictive ex-husbands before. They've seen manipulated grandparents. What they need to see now is your strength, your commitment to Lily despite everything." "How can I compete with what they've presented?" I asked, wiping my eyes. "They look perfect on paper." "Because paper isn't reality," Sarah replied. "And perfect isn't real. Your love for Lily is real. Your efforts despite impossible odds are real. That's what we need to show this afternoon." She squeezed my shoulder. "Don't give up. Lily needs you to keep fighting." Taking a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and washed my face. The afternoon session would begin soon, and despite everything, I would face it head-on. For Lily, I would not break. The afternoon session began with my testimony. As I took the stand, I felt a strange calm replace the morning's turmoil. With nothing left to lose, truth became my only option. "Ms. Mitchell, please describe your relationship with your daughter," Sarah began. Looking directly at Justice Harrington, I spoke from my heart. "Lily is the center of my world. From the moment she was born, every decision I've made has been with her well-being in mind. When my marriage ended, my priority was maintaining her sense of security and routine despite the upheaval. I described our daily life together: morning routines with silly songs to make brushing teeth fun, evening reading sessions where Lily would help tell the story, weekend adventures in free public parks when we couldn't afford other activities. I explained how I had created stability through consistency of love and attention, even when our external circumstances changed. When questioned about my employment history, I didn't minimize the challenges. Yes, I've had several jobs since the separation. The first position was eliminated due to company downsizing. I left the second when the commute made it impossible to pick Lily up from daycare on time. The third ended when the small business owner couldn't maintain my salary. Each time, I immediately sought new employment, never allowing more than 2 weeks to pass without securing work. "And your current employment status?" Sarah asked. "I lost my position at Palmer Marketing last week due to restructuring. I have interviews scheduled with 2 companies next week and have been taking online courses in digital marketing to expand my qualifications." Natalie's cross-examination was brutal, designed to provoke an emotional response that would support their narrative of my instability. She questioned my decision to leave my career, implying I had chosen dependence. She scrutinized my apartment choice, suggesting cheaper options existed in even less desirable neighborhoods. She prodded at my relationship with my mother, insinuating that if my own parent questioned my capability, perhaps there was truth to those concerns. Through it all, I maintained composure, answering truthfully but refusing to be provoked. When asked about my emotional state, I acknowledged the difficulty of the past year, but emphasized my focus on Lily's needs above my own feelings. "Ms. Mitchell," Natalie said, her tone deceptively casual, "your mother testified about your refusal to seek mental health treatment despite showing signs of depression. Why have you rejected professional help if, as you claim, your daughter's well-being is your priority?" The question was a trap, but I answered honestly. I haven't rejected treatment. I've researched affordable therapy options and am on a waiting list for a community mental health program. In the meantime, I attend a free support group for single parents at the community center and practice self-care strategies recommended by healthcare professionals. When I was finally excused from the stand, I felt drained but oddly strengthened. I had spoken my truth, regardless of the outcome. What happened next shifted the entire trajectory of the hearing. Sarah announced, "The defense calls Maria Gonzalez." A petite woman with warm eyes entered the courtroom. I recognized her immediately as Lily's preschool teacher, though I hadn't known Sarah had contacted her. After establishing her credentials, Sarah asked, "Ms. Gonzalez, how long has Lily Mitchell been in your class?" "Almost a year now," Maria replied. She joined shortly after moving to the neighborhood with her mother. And what have you observed about Lily during this time? Maria smiled. Lily is a delightful child. Bright, engaged, and well-adjusted despite the challenges she's faced. She transitioned to our class more smoothly than many children from more stable situations. Have you had opportunity to observe Ms. Mitchell's parenting? Absolutely. Abigail is one of our most involved parents. She never misses a parent-teacher conference, volunteers for class activities despite her work schedule, and maintains consistent communication about Lily's development. When Lily went through a phase of separation anxiety, Abigail worked closely with me to develop strategies that helped Lily build confidence. What about Lily's father? Has he been similarly involved? Maria's expression tightened slightly. Mr. Collins has attended one conference in the past year, arriving late and leaving early. He has picked up Lily from school approximately once a month, though several times he sent his fiancée instead without notifying us in advance, which caused distress for Lily. Natalie objected to this line of questioning as irrelevant, but Justice Harrington overruled, noting that comparative parental involvement was directly relevant to a custody determination. Maria continued, describing specific instances of my dedication, staying up all night to make cupcakes for Lily's birthday despite working early shifts, arranging my lunch breaks to attend special school events, creating learning activities at home to support Lily's development. She concluded by stating, "In my 15 years of teaching, I've rarely seen a parent so committed to their child's well-being under such difficult circumstances." During cross-examination, Natalie attempted to suggest that Maria was biased due to our friendship. Maria calmly replied, "My relationship with Ms. Mitchell is strictly professional. My assessment is based on daily observations of Lily's well-being and development, which is my primary concern as her teacher." As Maria stepped down, the courtroom door opened again. Dr. Laura Bennett, Lily's current pediatrician, entered unexpectedly. I turned to Sarah in confusion. "She contacted me after hearing about the case from Maria," Sarah whispered. "She asked to testify." After Dr. Bennett was sworn in, she established her credentials and her relationship to Lily. "I've been Lily's doctor since the Mitchell family moved to the neighborhood last year. I've seen her for regular checkups as well as minor illnesses." "Dr. Bennett, what can you tell us about Ms. Mitchell's attention to Lily's healthcare?" Sarah asked. "Abigail has never missed or been late to an appointment, despite what I understand to be significant financial and logistical challenges. When Lily developed an ear infection and needed antibiotics, Abigail called daily with updates and followed treatment instructions meticulously. Most notably, when insurance issues complicated covering Lily's asthma medication, Abigail worked tirelessly with my office staff to find an affordable alternative, taking time off work to make multiple pharmacy visits rather than leaving Lily without proper treatment." Dr. Bennett then addressed concerns about Lily's emotional well-being directly. Children are remarkably perceptive about their environments. Despite the stresses in their lives, Lily shows none of the typical signs of a child experiencing trauma or neglect. She is appropriately attached to her mother, developmentally on target, and physically healthy. These are strong indicators of adequate parenting even in difficult circumstances. Sarah then presented two unexpected pieces of evidence. First, my personal journal documenting every job application, interview, and professional development course I had pursued since the separation. The meticulous record showed over 50 applications, 12 interviews, and 3 online certification courses completed during late evening hours after Lily was asleep. Second, she submitted attendance records from Lily's daycare showing that despite Jason's claim of increased involvement, he had picked up Lily only 7 times in the past 6 months, while I had done so over 100 times, adjusting my work schedule to ensure consistency. During her cross-examination of Jason, Sarah uncovered another crucial detail. During his scheduled weekends with Lily, he frequently left her in Stephanie's care while traveling for business. When pressed about specific father-daughter activities, he struggled to name any beyond watching movies and going to the park sometimes. As the evidence mounted, Justice Harrington became increasingly engaged, asking detailed questions that suggested he was seeing beyond the superficial narrative Jason had presented. He requested specific examples of how I had maintained Lily's routine despite changing circumstances. He inquired about the proximity of my apartment to Lily's school and activities. He even asked about meal planning and bedtime rituals, details that revealed his understanding of what truly constitutes stability for a child. Most surprising was his direct question to Jason. "Mr. Collins, you've expressed concern about Ms. Mitchell's financial instability. What specific steps have you taken to address this concern, given that financial support would directly benefit your daughter's living situation?" Jason's answer was telling in its evasiveness, focusing on his willingness to provide for Lily in his own home rather than supporting her current living arrangement. When Justice Harrington pressed further about consistent child support, Jason admitted that payments had been irregular due to disagreements about parenting decisions. As the court session ended for deliberation, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. What had begun as seemingly insurmountable odds now felt, if not favorable, at least balanced. Sarah squeezed my hand as we gathered our papers. "You've done everything possible," she assured me. Now we wait. The 2-hour deliberation period was the longest of my life. I sat on a hard bench in the courthouse corridor, unable to eat or even drink the water Sarah had brought me. When we were called back into the courtroom, my legs felt wooden as I made my way to our table. Justice Harrington entered, his expression unreadable as he settled behind the bench. The courtroom fell silent, the tension palpable as everyone awaited his decision. Chief Justice Thomas Harrington adjusted his glasses and surveyed the courtroom. The silence was absolute as he cleared his throat to speak. Then, unexpectedly, he stood up from the bench. This unusual action caused a ripple of whispers that quickly subsided when he raised his hand. "Before I deliver my ruling in the matter of Collins versus Mitchell," he began, his voice resonating through the courtroom, "I want to address something directly." His gaze settled on me, then moved to Jason, then to my mother, before returning to the papers before him. "The purpose of family court is not to reward the parent with the most financial resources or the most impressive witnesses. Our sole concern is the well-being of the child in question." He paused, his expression serious. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have seen countless custody battles where children become pawns in adult games of ego and retribution. I had initially concerned this might be another such case." Justice Harrington then looked directly at me. "Ms. Mitchell, when this case began with testimony about your employment challenges and living situation, a narrative was crafted to suggest instability and inadequacy." Then, his voice strengthening, he continued with the words that would change everything. "However, the evidence has shown that you've been showing extraordinary resilience in the face of systematic obstacles. This court recognizes that stability for a child comes not from perfect circumstances, but from consistent love, attention, and dedication." The judge then systematically dismantled Jason's case with precision and insight. "Mr. Collins has presented himself as the stable provider, yet evidence suggests his interest in custody coincided with his new relationship rather than consistent involvement in his daughter's life. Employment stability and financial resources are relevant factors in custody determinations, but they cannot outweigh actual parenting involvement and emotional connection." He addressed the testimony from Lily's teacher and pediatrician, noting their first-hand observations of my parenting and Lily's well-being carried significant weight. These professionals who interact with Lily regularly have provided compelling evidence of Ms. Mitchell's dedication despite challenging circumstances. Then, in a moment that sent a shock through the courtroom, Justice Harrington revealed something personal. "I feel compelled to disclose that I have particular insight into this situation. I was raised by a single mother who faced similar challenges to Ms. Mitchell. My mother worked multiple jobs, moved us several times seeking affordable housing, and faced criticism from more financially secure family members. What provided me stability was not the address where we lived or the prestige of her employment, but her unwavering commitment to my well-being and the consistency of her love." His gaze then turned to my mother, and his tone became pointed but not unkind. "Mrs. Mitchell, as someone who has experienced single parenthood yourself, I am surprised by your testimony today. Family loyalty is not blind support of poor choices, but it is standing beside your loved ones during their darkest moments, especially when their struggles mirror your own past experiences. The court would hope that reflection might lead to a different understanding of your daughter's situation. Catherine's face flushed, her eyes downcast as the judge's words landed. Justice Harrington then delivered his ruling. Having considered all testimony and evidence presented, this court finds that it is in Lily's best interest to remain in the primary physical custody of her mother, Abigail Mitchell. Mr. Collins will have regular visitation rights to be exercised consistently and without delegation to third parties whenever possible. He continued with the financial aspects. Furthermore, Mr. Collins will provide child support in accordance with state guidelines based on his current income, to be paid through the court's monitoring system to ensure consistency. Additionally, he will contribute to childcare expenses proportionate to his income, enabling Ms. Mitchell to pursue stable employment without the burden of full childcare costs. Finally, he addressed us both. This court strongly encourages both parents to attend co-parenting counseling to develop a more collaborative approach for Lily's sake. Children thrive when their parents can set aside personal differences to focus on shared goals for their well-being. As Justice Harrington concluded the proceedings, Jason's face had hardened into an expression of disbelief. He immediately turned to Natalie, whispering urgently. She nodded and stood, requesting an appeal based on the court's apparent bias and disregard for the plaintiff's evidence of instability. Justice Harrington acknowledged the request, but noted, the right to appeal is preserved, but this ruling stands effective immediately. Appeals in family court do not stay implementation unless there is evidence of immediate harm to the child, which has not been demonstrated here. As the courtroom began to clear, Catherine approached me hesitantly. Abigail, She began, but I couldn't bear to hear whatever justification she had prepared. Not now, Mom, I said quietly but firmly. I need time. She nodded, her expression a mix of regret and defensiveness as she walked away. Outside the courthouse, Sarah, Maria, and Dr. Bennett gathered around me in an impromptu celebration. You did it, Sarah said, squeezing my arm. You stood your ground and fought for what matters. We all did, I replied, overwhelmed with gratitude for these women who had stood up for us when it mattered most. That evening, Lily and I had a small celebration dinner of her favorite mac and cheese. She didn't fully understand the significance of the day, only that Mommy seemed happier than usual. As I tucked her into bed, she asked innocently, Are we still going to live in our cozy apartment? Yes, sweetheart, I assured her, stroking her hair. This is our home. Good, she murmured sleepily. I like our home. After she fell asleep, I sat in our small living room, the events of the day washing over me. The victory felt surreal after months of fear and uncertainty. I had won the right to continue being what I already was, Lily's mother. But I had also lost my own mother in a way that felt irreparable. The mixture of triumph and loss left me in a state of emotional exhaustion that was neither entirely happy nor entirely sad. It was, I realized, the complex reality of life, rather than the black and white narrative Jason had tried to create. In that complexity, I found a strange comfort. We would be okay, Lily and I, navigating our imperfect but love-filled life together. 6 months passed like turning pages in a new chapter of our lives. The most immediate change came 3 weeks after the custody hearing when I was hired as a digital marketing specialist at Horizon Creative, a mid-sized agency that actually emphasized work-life balance in more than just their recruitment materials. My supervisor, Denise Cooper, had been a single mother herself and understood the logistical challenges I faced. We care about results, not when or where the work happens, she explained during my interview. As long as you meet deadlines and attend client meetings, you can structure your hours around Lily's schedule. This flexibility meant I could drop Lily at school each morning and pick her up most afternoons, working remotely during her evening activities and after she went to bed. With steady income came the ability to move to a slightly better apartment in the same neighborhood, allowing Lily to continue at her preschool. Our new place had 2 proper bedrooms, no water stains, and the bonus of a small balcony where we planted a container garden of herbs and cherry tomatoes. Lily took great pride in watering her plants and measuring their growth on a chart we kept on the refrigerator. The court-ordered child support arrived consistently now that it was monitored through the system, providing the financial stability that had been so elusive before. I opened a savings account specifically for Lily's future education and added to it each month, even if sometimes the amount was small. The security of knowing we could cover our basic needs without constant anxiety allowed me to be more emotionally present for Lily. Surprisingly, Jason began showing signs of becoming a more involved father after the wake-up call of the custody hearing. The first few visits after the ruling were tense, with handoffs characterized by stiff politeness. But gradually, something shifted. Perhaps it was the co-parenting counseling ordered by Justice Harrington, or maybe seeing that his legal maneuvers had failed freed him to focus on the relationship itself rather than winning. Whatever the cause, Jason started showing up consistently for his weekends with Lily and even attending school events when his schedule permitted. One afternoon, he arrived early for pickup and awkwardly asked if we could talk. "I've been thinking about how things went down," he said, studying the sidewalk rather than meeting my eyes. "Some of what happened, it wasn't right. Stephanie and I have been talking, and we both want Lily to have a good relationship with all of us." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I had expected. I nodded, not ready to forgive but willing to move forward. Lily needs all of us to get along. That's what matters now. Our co-parenting relationship would never be warm, but it evolved into something functional, focused on Lily's needs rather than our past grievances. We created a shared online calendar for school events and activities, developed consistent rules across households, and communicated clearly about any issues that arose. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. The most complicated healing process involved my mother. 3 months after the hearing, a letter arrived at our apartment. Catherine's handwriting on the envelope sent a jolt of complicated emotions through me. I set it aside, unable to face whatever justifications or recriminations it might contain. The letter sat unopened on my dresser for days before curiosity finally won out. Inside was not the defensive explanation I had expected, but something rarer: reflection and regret. Catherine wrote about watching her own mother's criticism of her parenting after my father left, how she had internalized the message that showing struggle was weakness. She described her fear that my challenges would somehow reflect on her, proof that she had failed to prepare me for life's hardships. "I chose status and appearance over supporting you when you needed me most," she wrote. "In doing so, I betrayed not only you but the young single mother I once was, struggling and scared but doing her best. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you might allow me some small place in your and Lily's lives again someday." The letter opened a door, but I stepped through it cautiously. I replied with a brief note suggesting we meet for coffee without Lily present. Our first encounter was awkward, laden with unspoken hurts and tentative attempts at connection. We agreed to take small steps, occasional phone calls, a short visit to the park with Lily, Sunday dinner once a month. During our third dinner together, Catherine finally addressed the elephant in the room directly. We were washing dishes side by side when she said quietly, "I'm still ashamed of what I did, testifying against you." I placed a plate in the drying rack before responding. "Why did you do it?" Catherine sighed, her hands stilling in the soapy water. "Jason approached me when you first separated. He was so concerned, so charming. He reminded me of your father in some ways, capable of making his version of events seem like the only reasonable perspective. I convinced myself I was being objective, that tough love would force you to either reconcile or pull yourself together the way I had. But that's not what happened," I prompted when she fell silent. "No. Instead, I nearly cost your daughter. I nearly cost Lily her mother." Her voice broke slightly. When I heard the judge talk about his own mother, I saw myself from the outside for the first time. Not as the strong, practical parent making hard choices, but as someone perpetuating the same judgment and conditional support that wounded me. It wasn't an instant healing, but it was a beginning. We were learning to build a new relationship based on who we were now rather than old patterns and expectations. Catherine started attending therapy herself, working through her own unresolved trauma from my father's abandonment and her years of struggling alone. While rebuilding family connections, I also found the importance of creating community beyond blood ties. At Denise's suggestion, I joined a support group for single parents at the community center. Every Thursday evening, while Lily attended the center's kids program, I sat in a circle with men and women navigating similar challenges. There I met Zoe Franklin, a nurse and single mother to 8-year-old twins, who became a close friend and emergency backup childcare provider. Marcus Chin, divorced father of a 6-year-old boy, often arranged playdates with our kids and shared resources he discovered. Tasha Williams, raising her 4-year-old alone after her husband's death, offered emotional insight from her grief counseling that helped all of us process our various losses. These connections created a safety net that family alone could not provide. We traded childcare during work emergencies, shared hand-me-down clothes and toys, celebrated birthdays and achievements together, and offered shoulders to cry on during setbacks. They understood the unique challenges of sole parenting in ways even well-intentioned coupled friends could not. On the 1-year anniversary of the custody hearing, I sat on our balcony after putting Lily to bed, reflecting on how far we had come. The journey had been more difficult than I could have imagined, but I had discovered reserves of strength I never knew I possessed. I had learned to stand firm in the face of intimidation, to advocate fiercely for what mattered most, and to rebuild from devastation. Most importantly, I had come to understand that family is both more and less than blood connection. More, because it can include the chosen family we gather around us in times of need. Less, because shared DNA alone does not guarantee support or understanding. True family, I realized, is defined by consistent love, respect, and presence, regardless of legal or biological ties. A week later, I encountered another mother at Lily's school looking overwhelmed and on the verge of tears. Jessica Harper had recently separated from her husband and was navigating the same terrifying territory of single parenthood and potential custody issues that I had faced a year earlier. Without hesitation, I approached her. "It gets better," I said, introducing myself. "And until it does, you don't have to figure it all out alone." I gave her Sarah Williams' contact information, invited her to the support group, and offered to watch her daughter for a few hours so she could attend a job interview. The relief in her eyes mirrored what I had felt when others had extended help to me at my lowest points. As Lily continues to grow and our lives evolve, I carry the lessons of this journey, that worth is not determined by others' validation. That resilience often looks messy from the outside, but is beautiful in its persistence. That perfect circumstances matter far less than consistent love. And that sometimes the family we need is the one we build, person by person, connection by connection, day by day. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a major setback or experienced family revenge that changed everything? I'd love to hear your stories of resilience in the comments below. How did you find strength when everything seemed to be falling apart? If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more real-life journeys about overcoming family revenge and betrayal. Share with someone who might need to know they're not alone in their struggles against family revenge and difficult circumstances. Remember, sometimes our greatest growth comes from our most difficult challenges, even when they involve family revenge we never expected. Thank you for being part of this community, and I wish you strength on whatever path you're walking today.